Okay, the meeting is now being recorded. We can begin.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jasmine. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon from the FMRI webinar. The FMRI at the Florida State University, the Frame Mobility Research Institute is honored to have Mr. Scott Grenerth as a webinar presented today. I would like to thank the ITFAU student chapter that they put this webinar together, and you can communicate with Jasmine. That's going to be the moderator of the Q&A at the end of the Scott presentation through the chat. Also, you can have the opportunity to ask directly a question to the presenter. So Scott Grenerth is Director for Engagement for Track Specialized Information Service for over 1 million miles of accident-free driving as an over-the-road truck driver. He has advocated for trackers regarding regulatory matters and served to the entry-level driver training advisory committee to create the first ever nationalized standards for the country. Scott is a member of the TRP Tracking Industry Research Committee, and his role at the TSA is that it works with both the public and private sectors to provide accurate real-time tracking parking solutions. Scott, the floor is yours.
All right, I'll turn on my video there for a moment here because I promise you're not going to be missing anything, as you can see. So hello there, everybody. And so as Evangelist just said, yeah, I've got in my background, I actually have the unique experience here of dealing with truck parking out there. So I'm going to turn up my video here for a second and get going and share my screen with the presentation here. There we go. All right, good deal. Looks like it popped up there. So indeed, like I said, I've been out there. I've dealt with truck parking in reality over my trucking career. It was my #1 stress. People might think it was the cost of maintaining a 18-wheeler, because that means you do have 18 tires, you've got sets of brakes, you've got a lot of things that can break, and eventually they will need to be replaced and maintained, and you got to keep ahead of that. But all that paled in comparison to finding a place to park. And while in this particular case in the picture, I was parked in the middle of a cornfield because I don't drive actively now. I was just helping out a friend, but we did haul. I hauled probably about 250,000 pounds of grain about 1.5 years ago. So still keep slightly active with that, but more importantly, I keep my ear to the ground with my good friends who are out there every day following the products that you all rely upon, and I do too. So with this today, as you may have heard me chatting early, if you were joined at the very beginning with one of the participants, I want to hit on several things because I know we've got a variety of people here today, and including a little bit of the basics, remembering why this matters, things that have happened out there, taking an agnostic look at the technology when it comes to truck parking information management systems, and looking at funding options that are out there to address truck parking, and absolutely questions by all means. So hitting on the basics for just briefly here, when we talk about truck parking being an issue, it clearly is an issue because truckers have shown it takes them a long time to find a parking space, way longer than would be ideal. And when we're talking about what's out there, you have all the state DOTs combined, that inventory is still less than 10% of all of it out there. So when we look at who can do what, state agencies are already limited in what they can do. And that is a big challenge here, because they at least can get funding from different ways and can take action, but they're still constrained in only being a certain percentage of the solution. Electronic logging devices now, I think people pretty much have gotten the idea, but that means tracking the driver's time literally down to the second. When was that? It was about 4 years ago. I just hauled a couple runs for a local company here that I've had a relationship with. And I'm not joking when I say I got back to the terminal here in Findlay, Ohio with 3 seconds left on my allowable driving time on the second day that I was out. I went over to Pennsylvania, delivered, came back, literally 3 seconds left. So it is a stress, and it makes it even worse for truckers when they're trying to find parking. And stress, of course, is not good when it comes to safety. And that's why I hope we are all here for that reason. We want to make our roads safer. Stressed drivers do not make for safe drivers. That does not help. So also what's adding to that stress is that truckers are not in control of their time. Shippers and receivers are the ones that really control their time more than anyone else on a day-to-day basis. Now, granted, to be clear, if you're talking about a driver going from New York City to LA, all that time in between, it's mostly the driver's time in their control. But the majority of drivers out there are not doing New York to LA or LA to New York. They're doing a much shorter runs. Very often, they're just out for one day and back. And in that time, they're doing a lot more of the loading and unloading. And that's real quickly when they think, all right, I'm a responsible professional trucker. I've got my plan figured out. Plan A. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to get there at this time. I'm going to, figure out I'll be unloaded or loaded, and I'll be out of there and head off. And this is where I'm going to park at the end of the day. Well, plan A becomes plan B because they've now been detained for, an hour when it should have only taken 15, 20 minutes to do the loading or unloading. Now plan B becomes plan C because now they've been detained for an hour and a half and they still shouldn't be there anywhere near that amount of time, and on and on. And FMCSA now is doing a driver detention study that was mandated through Congress. And I think that's going to be, I'll say, horribly eye-opening because to see how bad it is for drivers out there. And that is what really makes the truck parking situation even more difficult because they cannot plan and say, I know where I'm going to park for the night. I know a good place where I can actually get a spot. And I had an International 9200i when I was driving for my last 8 years as an owner operator. I can confirm for you that truck did not have as original equipment or optional equipment a crystal ball where I could see the future and know where there's a parking space. So that all adds in. So when we talk about how drivers utilize their time and how important that is and how they're, again, regulated by the hour, it's a bit of a mess that this is an industry that is regulated by time but paid by the mile, overwhelmingly paid by the mile. That is the huge majority of people out there. That's beginning to shift incrementally, and I mean very incrementally. More and more, I'm hearing of companies that are looking at alternative methods of compensation. And currently, TRB, one of the committees, is doing a compensation study. And I'm glad to be giving some input on that, along with some people who I know who are active drivers. So while that model is out there, that has really important implications for parking. And I call it the truck parking tax. So if you look at my example here, based upon a place I actually delivered 2 years ago, there's a Coca-Cola facility in Atlanta where they bring in their syrups and all their ingredients and that down there on the south side. I was coming from the north. And there is one truck parking facility in Atlanta right around here where my cursor is wiggling around. That's a Petro. One nice, large, big, full-service truck parking facility. There's a tiny, itty-bitty pilot just like right down the next exit that has like 12 spots. Doesn't even matter. Doesn't even make a difference. Other than that, they're recently is I think right around here, Love's opened a facility. Love's truck stops are really well done. They do what they do very well, but they're not big. So that adds some parking, but not much. All the way up here north of Cartersville is a grouping of truck stops where there's a useful amount of parking. And that's pretty much if you're coming southbound on 75 and you need to deliver the next morning in Atlanta, you're parking all the way up here. 60 miles of driving. And by the time you hit Marietta, you could see, I did the screen capture this morning actually at like 10 o'clock or so, that there are still remnants of traffic. And now granted, truckers can't even go through Atlanta. You have to go around to 75 unless you are delivering inside the loop. So bottom line, if you have to park way back up here, 60 miles away, and deal with untold amounts of traffic delays and mess coming into Atlanta, that means all this stuff on the right. You're polluting the environment with putting CO2 out there, particulate emissions. You're getting backed up in traffic, dealing with anger and frustration. You're losing productivity because the first part of your day is going to be a bare minimum of an hour, and that's dreaming. That's like Sunday. Sunday morning, you might get through there in an hour. Any other day of the week, this is going to be an hour and a half journey that you've had to wait. So that means you're starting your day off way behind. So what I call this a truck parking tax is that if we have cities like Atlanta with a dearth of parking, just not available at all in the city, but yet massive amounts of consumption, you offer me that load as a trucker, I'm going to go, well, what else is available? Because I'm going to be behind right off the bat at just getting in there to make my delivery that day or to pick up my load that day. I'm going to say, what's available going to some other city? And if you want to entice me to take that load into Atlanta, you're going to have to start offering more compensation because that's what I'm going to need in order to make up for my lost time and productivity. And there are companies out there that are companies with employee drivers who work for them. And Kriska is the one I'll give you a specific example of out of Canada, where they had loads that they were hauling for Unilever Corporation. Of course, we're talking Unilever, major multi-conglomerate company. They were going into the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area. Same kind of scenario as here, just a slightly different geographic region. The drivers for that company hated going there with a passion. And the difference is Kriska, even though these are people working for them, they're smart. They let their drivers pick and choose the loads they're going to haul. So driver after driver would decline that Unilever load down to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area. And eventually, the people at Unilever, thankfully, they have a guy there who was very smart, and he's asked them, "Why are you not picking our loads? We're paying you, money for these loads." They told them, the people from the carrier from Kriska said, "Hey, our drivers don't want to go there because there's no parking." What they ended up doing was they said, "Let's do a pilot program and create an area where the truckers can park at the facility right here on site. That way they can come down out of, they were coming out of roughly the Quebec area or Montreal. I forget, Quebec or Montreal. And they would come down and have a parking spot waiting for them when they got there, right at the facility. All they had to do was carry a flashlight with them turned on at nighttime, any time of the day or night with a reflective vest. And if they left their truck, they had to just go directly to the driver lounge facility. And they made sure the parking spaces they gave them and delineated for this were right in front of that. So the truckers had access to a restroom. They had access to vending machines and a place they could just sit down if they wanted to. Nothing elaborate. And the difference is this. Unilever went from begging Kriska to have someone please bring a load down for them to Kriska's end. Now the drivers were fighting over who got to haul that load. And by the way, I heard this straight from Unilever, the person who was in charge of this whole program. So now they are a carrier or a shipper and receiver of choice, which is what every one of them out there will be striving for, instead of going, yeah, we don't really care. And it benefits them because now they're in a better bargaining position to say, hey, we helped made this run more efficient for your company, for your drivers, help you retain your drivers because we've got a desirable environment we've created instead of what you see on the screen in front of you here of the anger, frustration, lost productivity, and again, and the parts of it that are, when you talk about equitability to everybody, you don't have people sitting there idling their truck where they shouldn't be and all that. So it really worked for them, and I'm realizing I should put a couple more slides on here for this one, but the bottom line is this. I talked with the person at Unilever who was responsible for this whole initiative 2 years after this program was up and running. By that time, they had expanded it throughout their entire network of facilities. And again, remember, Unilever, I guarantee you somebody, somewhere in the past month, you've touched one of their products, if not bought it. They're a huge company all across the country. And many facilities have implemented the same program. So I asked him, with a lot of trepidation, because you always hear about the negative things about those truckers out there. They're always doing this. They're doing drugs. They're soliciting prostitutes, and they're killing children. The headlines are ridiculous. So when you look at resistance to truck parking out there, so I asked him, some things are clearly true. There's bad lawyers and bad doctors obviously out there. So how's this program going? What kind of problems have you had? And he told me, Scott, we're fully 2 years plus into this. Zero. Not one incident anywhere that we've had. So they flipped this whole idea of you have to pay a quote unquote tax to entice truckers to come into a bad situation, and flipped it around completely to the opposite, where they are a carrier of choice. So thinking about making sure there's truck parking near in the vicinity where truck drivers are at is really important for a wide range of reasons, as illustrated in here. And at one of my very last slides, I'll show you a model of how to approach that there when we talk about solutions. So there you go. Again, major implications for truck parking that go far beyond just I want to be close to my customer. There's so much more involved with it. And of course, as part of this too, I never want to neglect pointing out, as you'll see in a moment here, the safety. A trucker parking right inside the gate at a shipper and receiver doesn't need to worry about their life being lost during the night. So that's where this comes in. So looking at efforts out there, so to address truck parking, and you had the biggest thing by far yet was when the MASTO states, the Mid-American states collectively got together, applied for a Tiger grant and got it, and to put in a real-time truck parking information system. So that's what we're looking at the timeline here for. But let's just go back for a second. So I'll finish that up real quickly, and we'll go back to the beginning. So that's 2015 where they got that. First of all, though, in 2014, Michigan was the very first state in the country that did a truck parking information management system. And just so you know, that was our company that did that, TSPS. So and then the MASTO states did it collectively in 2015, multiple states. And it took all the way to 2019 to deploy that completely. And we did Iowa, Wisconsin, and some additional sites in Michigan. And in Iowa, we did 43 sites, and they were done in 9 months. So that's all it actually took. It was 9 months in here for the actual setting it up once contracts were awarded and we were given the go ahead. So looking at taking action, this time frame really has got to get shortened up, because we're talking about lives and safety here. So let's go back to that timeline. So just very briefly, because I know there's always new people involved, Jason Rivenberg was a trucker who showed up early for his delivery of milk in South Carolina and was told, nope, you can't park here, you can't come on the property, you can't just take a nap while we're waiting for you or anything, you need to leave. And Jason went to another place to park, just an old gas station. People park there all the time with their trucks right off Interstate 26. I've been right by there, been visited the site more than once. And he was killed for the whole whopping, I think it was $7 that he had in his wallet. Left behind a widow, pregnant with 2 children, and very pregnant actually. Thankfully, his wife Hope is incredible, and she worked to get Jason's Law enacted, which was the first real study to look at the truck parking situation and put numbers to it, and say, hey, this is how bad the situation is. But also within here, way more personal to me, in 2014, right at the time Michigan was deploying their first nation system here. I hauled a flatbed with a side kit, is what it's referred to. So it's a flatbed trailer with we'll call simply a permanent tarping solution. It makes tarping the load really quick and easy when you haul coils of steel and aluminum. I hauled that out of Alaris Rolled Products down in Kentucky all the time. Michael Boglin did the same thing. Never knew the guy. But it turns out we both went to the same facility and same customers all the time. So he pulled a load of aluminum coils out of Alaris down there in Kentucky, went up to Detroit, Michigan, pulled into Kenmac Metals there, ThyssenKrupp Kenmac Metals in Detroit. Same thing. The gate was locked. You can't come in. He parked at this spot like 150 feet from the gate where there's a guard there during the day. There's not a guard there during the night. And it is Detroit, which I love the city dearly, but it certainly is not the safest city in the country in many regards. He was shot, then his truck burned down, as you can see, again, for pitting some money that he had. So when I talk about the frustration with the timeline here, this is why. People like Jason, people like Michael, and truckers know this. They know that the risk of what they're doing if when they park in an unauthorized location that doesn't have safety built in. So just briefly here, when we talk about this, in that same time frame, a lot of money was spent on studies, pilots, other things. And again, there was the time frame there. Obviously, I am part of active in TRB, as you heard in the intro, very much so. And I'm talking with people all the time about studies, but we need to think about studies with action. And I want to give you an example because I'm not the kind of person that complains about things. I'm the person that says, here's what we can do. Here's where we should be going. There's a good example, and I'm glad to say, my home state of Ohio. They have put in for a grant to get raise grant funding to have a study to work on the development of 10 truck parking sites throughout the state. So as I put at the top, it's a study, but with real world action to make sure people are safe out there. And that's the drivers, the loads they're hauling, the people they share the road with, everybody. And what they're doing is they're looking at locations that include a variety of spots that the state owns, such as abandoned rest areas, way stations, excess land parcels, and looking at what they can do. Like an example is in Fernley, Nevada, the state of Nevada created truck parking immediately next to a Flying J. And as part of that agreement, the state put all that in. They constructed it, put in the lighting so it's as safe as they can be. And then the Flying J location is now responsible for the trash pickup on the site. It's a win-win. Flying J gets more customers than they ever had, and they didn't have to pay for the parking facility there. And the state now knows they have a safer environment with more parking. So examples like that when we talk about adjacent to private truck stops. So when we talk about truck parking, I want you to just keep in mind, that having a variety of parking is important for a lot of reasons, because when we went into COVID, and this is something that I fully grasped the importance of this immediately, but I think still a lot of people don't. People weren't even able, a lot of places closed down. And now truck stops generally did not close down, but they really limited their services. And in this case, the Federal Highway Administration put out, because let me back up, I'm sorry. There is a long-term existing prohibition on commercial activity on interstate corridors along the main line. And there's a lot of resistance to ever changing that from sectors that lobby to keep that the way it is and maintain the status quo. But during COVID, FHWA, to their huge credit, very rapidly said, hey, we're going to allow food trucks at rest areas so truckers can actually get food. Because you cannot just pull into any old Publix down in Florida or Wegmans in New York or a Kroger here in Ohio and just park your truck anytime you want. Some of those places, you will get your boot put on your semi. Yes, they have boots for semis, so that now you're paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars to get your vehicle back in possession because you parked somewhere that you didn't know it, but you weren't allowed to park. So FHWA said, hey, for the time being, while there's a public emergency declared, we'll allow food trucks at rest areas. And that helps truckers immensely. So in this picture here, top left, that's from a local TV station up here near Toledo, Ohio, WTOL. To their credit, they went out to the rest area and they got pictures of truckers getting food. And they talked to the truckers, and the truckers were like, thank you. We're so glad that you did this here in Ohio. Ohio Indiana and Arkansas, all 3 states deserve loads of credit. I don't think the ink was dry on the pen at the FHWA office, and they had it ready to go. And it was simple and quick, and boom, there were food trucks like literally the next day at rest areas. This is the gentleman who ran that food truck there, and he was like, this is great because we're doing business we couldn't otherwise. So even when we think about emergency situations, things coming up, got to think about truck parking with that too, and even what's available there for drivers. So I just wanted to briefly touch on that because that's something that gets missed in a lot of conversations. So as we look at what's been done, there's been progress. So the bright blue here, like right here in the Midwest, that's the MASTO states. Those are the states that did the grant, the Tiger Grant together. We also have a couple of locations over here on the East Coast. Virginia's part of that has did like a pilot site several years ago that does real-time truck parking information system. And Florida did what they call their T-Pass down there, which is only at rest areas and way stations, which is what the majority of states have. My home state of Ohio, it doesn't even include all of the major interstates, and it's only limited to rest areas and only rest areas in Ohio, not even way stations. Michigan does include private truck stops, and that's the key thing here. Iowa also includes private truck stops. So the key thing there is real simply, we got the contract for those, and we're the only ones who've successfully delivered on that so far. So that's a huge thing here. I say it's very important to think about that states have got to really make sure that happens because that's where truckers can get a shower and get food, things like you just saw on this previous slide. Parking is the most important thing, but whenever we can, we need to think about what else can we add to it beyond just parking. Safe parking, number one, definitely number one, but please let's add on to it because people, as someone who did flatbedding, I can tell you, you get hot and sweaty and stinky and smelly by the end of the day, and you need a shower. That helps you get a better sleep, and again, that goes back to safety. So then we have out here also I-10 corridor. We've been awarded the grant for the contract, excuse me, for Texas, and also New Mexico is contracting with us. Arizona and California are coming along here, and so this corridor is going to be getting instrumented as well. We're ready to go as quickly as we can out there. So got that, and then there's a few other corridors. So, and then we definitely see that border ports, especially border crossings, are a key area. So at the bottom, just want to point this out. 2 distinct issues for truck parking. Not enough inventory, which we've talked about, those places to park the truck. And then on the bottom right, not enough information. And that's where the real-time information systems come in to help truckers avoid going to places that are completely full and wasting their time. So here's just another look at what this looks like as far as with dots for every site where there is a real-time truck parking information system. So you can see there's loads of them across Iowa. Iowa, very briefly, they did not put up roadside signs. They opted to get the truckers being able to get the notification through their 511 system, through apps, and utilize it that way. That way they saved a lot of money on the roadside signs. But I'll tell you, if you talk to truckers, they do appreciate those roadside signs because they're right there. It's a glance and you're done. It's truly the best. It would be best to have both options, but there's clearly advantages both ways because Iowa, as you can see, has a much dramatically better, denser coverage than any other state does. So, and again, you can clearly see with this map too that there are such large gaps out there of states that have not participated or opted out, whatever. And so there you go. So getting into some information on the real-time systems to give you an idea of what's out there and what's been done. So if you follow my cursor here over to the far bottom right, see that red line, vertical line going straight up and down. That is what's called a screen line setup. It can be done with different types of technologies. You can use different kinds of sensors, is what I mean by that. And that means that for this facility, this is a facility with truck parking and it's an Arby's or a Hardee's, a fast food restaurant. It's one of the sites that we installed and monitor there in Iowa, far western side of the state. So you have all kinds of vehicles coming in and out of here. Cars, pickup trucks, motorcycles going over here, and then the semis coming over here to fuel their truck or park their truck or going and get whatever they want to get. So as soon as someone crosses that screen line, that vehicle is counted as having entered the facility. And once they cross it going out, they're counted as having left. So very simply, you say, aha, this is how many parking spots we've got in here. That means once a truck comes in, one less spot is available. When a truck leaves, boom, a spot has opened up. So that's counting by using Screenline. It's a simplest way of doing this, to put it just clearly. And you can even account for the fact that, hey, here are all the marked parking spaces. I guarantee you, from my experience, and I know if you've ever even looked at the truck parking situation, even remotely in a passing manner, you'll know that people are going to park everywhere they can because you've seen truckers parked on entrance ramps, exit ramps, the shoulder of the road. So there are going to be people cramming in here way beyond just what the authorized spaces are. And by using a Screenline count, you can capture all that unauthorized parking as well. Where that's really important, what I've heard from DOTs, that allows them to make the case to FHWA for more funding because they can say, hey, our rest area, and I'll give you a real world example from the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. They have a huge, beautifully laid out parking facility in Cave City, Kentucky. It's just north of Mammoth Cave, as you can probably tell from that name. And they've got northbound, southbound, basically identical. From the entrance ramp into the facility to the end of the ramp going back out onto the interstate onto I-65 is just a hair under 1 mile all total. So it's an extraordinarily long ramp in and out. Plus they have 100 spaces. I think if I remember correctly, it's right around 100 spaces in there marked for parking. Every night they get filled up there to like 150 plus trucks because so many trucks are parking in that unauthorized area. So when I talk about the value of capturing those numbers as well, it is important. So when we talk about gathering information, another way of doing it is spot specific. So everywhere that you see these little icons on here, that's where a puck has been put in the ground. In this case, in Iowa, they wanted that kind of system, so we installed that for them. The problem is these sensors are not working. They failed dramatically. Florida DOT told me directly in 30 days, 10% of their in-ground puck sensors, magnetometers had failed. And then another 30 days along, another 10% failed. In Iowa, as you can see, majority of them have failed. So in Iowa, now you can, if you know what you're doing, make some adjustments and help to compensate if some of your sensors are down, but that's only some. That's why I underline that word here, some adjustment. You can't, once you reach a certain threshold, it's just gone. So consequently, I could tell you Iowa DOT, they are working on right now a contract with us to replace all those sensors, the magnetometers, the pucks, with radar-based sensors that use modern radar system. And because you don't have that, and we'll get to that in a second here. So that's pucks, magnetometers that you put in the pavement. And so, yeah, there you go. So these right here, there we go. I forgot I have it on the next slide. So this is down in those of you in FAU listening in, if you're not too far away, this is Martin County, Florida, I-95 southbound rest area. Took that picture, about 3 years ago now. That is a bare magnetometer. That's not what it's supposed to look like. This right here, this one was holding up, but not that one. So that one is toast, is gone. So when you see a short lifespan, you can see it right there because they advertise battery life of 10 years. I promise you, you'll never get 10 years of life out of it, not even close. And it only tells you if there's an object above it or not. You don't get any further data. So with video analytics, that is what you see here in that picture on the bottom right. It's video camera mounted above the ground, so that's good. It's not an invasive installation. You're not cutting into the pavement. Nobody's driving over it. And video can, analytics can capture some additional information about the vehicle types and sizes, things like that. And when it's good weather, nice sunny weather, like in that picture right there, that it does very well. That it can be a very good accuracy. Problem is, it's video. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. I know what a gator gusher, a toad strangler, whatever you want to call it, massive downpour looks like. Happens all summer long in Florida, as an example, and it happens periodically throughout the rest of the country. Smoke from fires, fog, anything like that can obscure the view, and there goes your accuracy with the video analytics camera. So they have some good strong points, but they have weaknesses when it comes to weather. Then you get to modern high frequency radar, and just in full disclosure, this is a system that our company has, we've innovated with, and that uses, again, I keep highlighting on the word modern. It's not the kind of radar that some states have used in the past. It's much higher frequency. But the bottom line is, again, we have the benefit like video analytics. It's above ground, not an invasive installation. This is at a rest area in New Mexico, picture on the left. So you can see exactly how it's installed. It's a tiny little device, like in states like Florida where you need to worry about wind load from hurricanes. It's no problem there. Again, like a video camera, that also has that benefit. And because it's radar based, it is accurate in all weather. Doesn't matter if it's rain, snow, fog, smoke, low light conditions, all those things don't affect it at all. And just like video analytics, it can give you more information about the categorization of video. So that hits on what's been used historically, and for the types and categories of devices, and how there are strengths and weaknesses. And by the way, I'll go back real quickly. Want to guess which system is the cheapest? Bingo. This one, magnetometers. They are very inexpensive, but as you could tell, they have extreme limitations. So looking at these installations out there, lessons learned, talking with other states out there, talking with others, then acting is really important. It's time to actually address safety, including those private truck stops in the plants out there. And because they do have the showers, they have hot food, they have supplies. There is a place for them. Rest areas are great sometimes. Sometimes I just wanted a rest area, but other times you needed the other facilities. And then along with that, making sure that they actually are delivered, because there have been some states like my home state started out saying, hey, we want private rest areas included as part of this contract. They got 0. Kentucky, same thing. They started out saying they wanted X number of private locations as part of it. They got a grand total of 1. And unfortunately, that site doesn't even work because they're using an older type of radar there, I believe, for that site. Whatever the technology is, it's not working. So making sure the standards are upheld, the API feeds, that they are uniform, they're robust, they can disseminate the correct data, the site descriptions are accurate, and also definitely consider operations and maintenance to make sure that that's included in the budget. And with more on that in a second here, and by some states have set up contracts as a data contract, which can help them dip into other pots of money. So looking at that creatively, that is very helpful, we found. Some states, again, have had great success. Other states may have their hands tied and can't do that. And definitely pursuing funding with other states to build a network, because this needs to be a network. And I know talking with people at FHWA, they really like those multi-state networks. And lastly, when it comes to looking at all the funding options, so the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which has historically not been involved in this, does have money they would love to give to states. And that is specifically for the technology side of this, for real-time truck parking systems. And so going back to operations and maintenance, money can be allocated for that in that funding. So looking at the funding completely is really important. And this is the top part of the memo from Martin Knopf at FHWA. And the bottom line is, if you were to go all the way to the bottom of this document, as you can see on the left, there are 15 different silos of funding available for truck parking through FHWA, FMCSA. So there are options out there. And when you look at what can be done out there, there's former waste stations that can be utilized, former rest areas, Missouri has done an amazing job of converting former rest areas that are decommissioned into just truck parking only areas with vault toilets, which are very low cost to maintain. And I'll tell you, hey, I'd be thrilled to at least have that. That's better than having to make do in your truck cab by a million miles. Looking at former construction staging areas, P3s, things like that. So just a real quick example, 4 quick pictures to show you of looking at innovation. Huge credit to Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. They commissioned a study to look at where they could expand existing rest areas for, expand existing areas for truck parking or create new ones. And these are some of the spots they came up with. So you can see here, this is the proposed expansion. They said, hey, you know what? You've got all this truck parking already. We could utilize this area right here for more truck parking. Another one, they've got existing truck parking areas here and here, but they realize we can just lay this out differently and get more in there, a lot more gain of sites. Here's a site where I've often thought, why aren't these areas utilized more? Go ahead and create right off the interstate, when you're not on the interstate, but on the other access road, an entry into this area and have room for parking spaces in there. I think this is the last one. And another one, and by the way, very briefly, North Carolina set up a brand new rest area facility. It's just beautiful. And they set it up similar to this, except it's a full facility. It's not just truck parking. Like here, they say potential expansion of facilities. They put in a brand new rest area right in the middle, I-77. I just stopped at it on my way back to Ohio here a few days ago. And it's a left-hand exit, and then you go back on this way. And I've had people say, oh my gosh, that's dangerous. Okay, I grew up in Florida. I grew up going up to the turnpike every spring for a really inexpensive family trip up to the center part of the state. And I've drove a lot of miles in Florida. All of the turnpike rest area facilities are in the middle with entries and exits like this. Nice, especially long ramps to get back up so you are well up to speed and can merge safely, no matter which direction you're going. And I think North Carolina has had that facility up for about 4 years now, and I haven't heard about a single accident at all from a facility put in the middle. Of course, the big gain is this. They save money by only having one building to maintain. You don't have a building over here and a separate building over here. You can have just one person or whatever they've got for their crew, just taking care of the northbound, southbound, eastbound, westbound. So just throw that in there quickly. So last thing here is looking at something that I know state DOTs probably aren't going to get involved with as much, but directly by creating this, but by being a champion for it and pointing it out, using the proverbial bully pulpit, is the idea of saying, hey, when we've got a new industrial park going in, you're going to have a warehouse here, a factory there, maybe someone's going to have a trailer storage facility here, some kind of seasonal, business that's, like maybe more tied to agriculture or things like that. Some small new business that's popping up. They're not sure how big they're going to be, how soon. Last mile delivery company over here. Instead of they need truck parking, they need truck parking, they need truck parking, you get the idea. Let's have in a centralized location close to these facilities. And I want to be clear, it doesn't need to be next door. It could be even a half mile away. But if it's a facility open to all the people delivering to these spots, that means truckers can park here, and we freed up spaces at the rest areas in the truck stops. And people can come in here and park, even if it's just a well-lit facility with a simple restroom facility. That would be amazing. So, and I'm glad to say we're working with someone on doing this on our side of things, but I'm glad to see anyone address that. So wrapping up, there are solutions. There's capacity and there's information. So with capacity, finding public assets can be used, finding out what can work with the private sector to make it happen, and then getting that real-time information to truckers because they need to know both, oh, there are spots available here, and oh, darn it, that spot's full. I'm not going to waste my time going there. They're equally valuable. You don't want to waste your time when every second is tracked. So these are ways we can get to making the roads safer out there. So with that, I'll quit yapping and turn it over for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Grenerth, for your presentation. If you have any questions to the audience, just leave them in the chat box or unmute yourself.
Okay, hello. Mr. Grenerth, that was a very nice presentation. I have like more of a curiosity question. Since you mentioned that you have, experience making trips around Florida, so what happens during, weather emergency situations? Because, especially during summer with all the, hurricanes and tropical storms, what happens? Like, do you like temporarily cease trips, or do drivers just keep driving? And I would also imagine that the truck parking issue, it becomes even more accentuated in these cases. So, what's your experience with that?
Absolutely. I'm well aware of it because I actually, after I came off the road driving truck, I worked for OOIDA, the Owner Operator Independent Drivers Association, which represents actual truckers, not the trucking companies, the big mega million motor carriers, the drivers. And we got calls from members there saying, "Hey, I got a FEMA load going down to Florida, but they want me to be staged here, but I don't know where I'm going to park." So it is a very real problem. And I know that actually FAU, one of the students there did a study and identified lots of places where there could be parking in a situation like that. But the problem still remains knowing when I get down there, is there a spot? Because as you pointed out, it's even more acute concern during a severe weather issue. You want to make sure you're not going to pull in the spot that's going to end up flooded. Um, and so there's a lot of hesitancy on truckers to head into the more optimal staging spots for emergency response in a situation like that because they don't know what they're going to encounter. So that's where I can envision utilizing a system like that does real-time truck parking information at sites that are staging areas would be a good solution, because now the trucker can look before everything gets bad and before there's power outages. They can go at least go, hey, all right, I can see there's still 50 parking spaces available at the county fairgrounds, which to me is a very realistic scenario. And that way they know they got a spot there. And then you're right, though, when it comes to the weather and things getting, once a storm has hit, then it's made even worse. And so that's where having a system like that that has solar power, can be independent. That way there's, as soon as possible, as long as there's cellular phone service, you can still share the information. So, did that answer your question?
Yes, perfect. In fact, the research that you mentioned that students have done here at FAU, I'm working with that research that they did with University of Florida, and so we are, it is a collaboration between FAU and University of Florida, where we are using the data that they collected for the research to start a new research regarding truck parking and alternative truck parking locations here in Florida. So yeah, that definitely answered. Thank you.
I heard about that, and don't hesitate to reach out to me. I would be glad to talk with you more in depth on that and give you some examples of what could be done and some suggestions on what maybe could be done to have like a pilot project, something like that.
Oh, that perfect. So I would definitely take that into consideration.
I'm
Thank
all
you.
about really making things happen. I really am a man of my word. I don't just say it, I live it. I want to make things happen. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
We have a few questions in the chat. So the first one's from Jaisha. She says, are there any truck stops or rest areas that cater specifically to truck drivers? And what are the parking restrictions, associated fees, and regulations for truck drivers who utilize these facilities? Moreover, how do truck drivers typically discover truck stops and rest areas? And what methods do they employ to navigate them? Also, do you have any suggestions about implementation of these facilities near port areas be beneficial for both truck drivers and surrounding communities?
Oh, there's a lot in there. Okay, yeah. So feel free to remind me if I forget part of it. So yeah, there are facilities out there. There's companies like TA Petro. It's the two companies that merged basically years ago. That they're a truck parking company. You know that they specialize in having large parking facilities for truckers and full service facilities. So like they have showers, they'll have some kind of place where you can eat. These days they've kind of pared it back to COVID. COVID did a number on a lot of places, definitely did. And so there aren't as many sit down restaurants, but there's at least a fast food restaurant in those places. And they have a basic services shop for people who can get maintenance done on their vehicle or buy parts that they may need to maintain and keep that vehicle operating safely. But then there's also Love's, Pilot, Flying J, Wilco Hess. You know, there's a lot of other companies out there, some Quick Trips, places like that that have truck parking and that also are in it. And Love's is the one that has expanded dramatically in recent years. They run their business really incredibly well. They're just not, as I mentioned earlier, not very large. So they kind of add a little bit and a little bit more parking. But all of these places, the problem is they make their money off of what comes in the front door, which is the people in cars buying snacks. They've got a whole car full of kids and they all want their favorite candy bar. They all want their favorite soda. And that's the high profit margin stuff. And so that's why they don't provide bazillions of parking spaces because they don't make as much money off of that. And even though I'm sure they do care about truckers and highway safety, they don't care that much to run their business into the ground by building very expensive parking lots and not making a big return on their investment. So that's a key part of the problem here, why this solution hasn't been solved years ago, because there's just not the money unless you directly charge for the spaces. Okay, all right, remind me what the next part of the question is. Another
The
couple
next
parts there.
part was, do you have any suggestions about implementation of these facilities near port areas
Oh yes,
be
ports,
beneficial for
sure.
both truck drivers and surrounding communities?
Absolutely, because indeed, and that brings up, it's a good point you bring up there, is staging. So when we talk about truck parking, it goes into two basic parts. Overnight, which is like what most people think of. You got a trucker who's tired, they need a place to park. So that's long-term overnight parking, or even parking over the weekend when they're home for the weekend, things like that. Then staging, which is more like a port-oriented thing. You can also have a spot that, let's say, I'll just make up as an example. Let's say Port Canaveral in Florida, right by my parents. I was just there. Let's say you say, hey, we're going to create a parking area here, but we've got residents nearby. We don't want it to be an overnight parking area. So starting at 6 a.m. in the morning, you can come in and park and get staged. So that way, when we open at 8 o'clock, you're already there. So that way, a trucker can at least get in ahead of schedule and be ready to deliver right there in the vicinity. And then say, okay, it closes at 10 o'clock at night. That way, again, people can have their quiet hours from 10 o'clock till 6 or 10 to 7 or whatever. Um, there's a lot of private shopping centers that do variations of that where I used to deliver to Lowe's stores. There's one in the Cleveland, Ohio area I delivered to many, many times that there you're allowed to park there overnight, but you cannot idle your engine. So that was the trade-off. Gladly. I'm happy to not idle my truck. I'm glad to be safe and secure and at the place where I want to deliver in the morning. I'll just, cuddle up underneath the quilt and the sleeping bag, whatever it takes during the winter time in Cleveland, and in return for that. So that is a good way of addressing that. And definitely ports have horrible issues, generally speaking, with backlogs of many, many trucks to try and get in because of a lot of factors. And so just having any kind of parking near a port facility can help those truckers get parked and go back to what I just said in the case of Cleveland. Turn the truck off so you're not impacting the communities around the ports, which tend to be most economically disadvantaged, and with kids who have problems with asthma, things like that, because there's a lot of industrial activity. So say, hey, you can come in here, we'll offer you parking. We just want to find a way to make it idle free, at least when the weather's not extreme, because gosh, when it's at the most extreme, it sure be good if it could still, because that trucker needs to be able to be comfortable and be safe too. Did I cover it all there?
I think so.
Okay, good deal.
The next question is from Sarah. She says, very good presentation. As a driver, would you know why a truck driver would park on an interstate entrance ramp when there is a brand new truck stop, Loves, just a few hundred feet away?
Bingo, you gave yourself the answer. The reason is the word new. That is the reason why these real-time truck parking information systems need to be out there. You get a lot of old school drivers who are the majority of truckers out there. Keep in mind, the typical age range of the trucker is way up there. It's largely people who've been in the industry forever, and they sometimes forget about the new people, and sometimes they even get in this situation. So here you are, you're driving down the interstate, and you're getting tired, you're about to run out of hours, whatever the situation, or both, all the above, and you're just thinking, man, that last rest area was full, that last truck stop was full. I don't know what lies ahead of me, but man, there's a spot right here. I'm going to go to bed there out of desperation. You just don't know that there's a new facility there. And that gets to and I remember now the previous person asked also, how do truckers find out about parking? That was the thing I didn't answer. So this is perfect. How they find out about parking is when they see it. That is the number one thing. There are various apps out there that kind of vary in their accuracy. Now, of course, all of the truck stop companies out there, the ones I just mentioned earlier, TA Petro, Pilot Flying J, Loves, all them, they all have their own app that will gladly tell you where their nearest location is. But the problem is that means I need to go to the TA Petro app now. Well, what about the Loves? There might be a Loves location. Now I need to go to that one. Well, gosh, maybe there's another one out there. I need to look at that app. That's the frustration. So we are actually, just not to get into a commercial about it, we are creating an app that will have all these sites together in one spot. So it's people don't have to keep looking for the Florida T-Pass information on truck parking. Oh, now I'm in Georgia. I need to look up Georgia's information. Whoops, I crossed over the border into Tennessee. It would all be seamless across one spot, because that is what's needed to help make it easier. So that's why they just don't know it's there. And that can happen especially to newer people, which are always coming into the industry. But when it's a brand new Loves, it can happen anytime to a veteran driver who's been out there for 50 years. I had a good friend who drove for 50 years, and he told me about that one time. I've just never been to the city. I don't know what's there. So there you go.
Sarah also asks, can you please provide more information on modern high-frequency radar systems?
Okay, so the basic deal is they're using very high frequency radar, which gets down to 3 centimeters in definition. So it can see things down that small. So for example, we could tell there's a tractor trailer coming into a facility, not just a big blob that's 70 feet long. It's a tractor and a trailer, because there's no way you're going to get a 3 centimeter gap between a tractor and a trailer. It's more like 3 feet is being close, actually. So we could tell you there's a straight truck coming into that facility, or we could tell you there's a pickup truck hauling the thing coming in, or a car or motorcycle, etc. So, and that high frequency radar, what we use is actually a combination of that as our baseline, because it works in all weather. And if when I showed that picture, you might have noticed that the close-up picture of the device, you could see there's a little circular object on it. That's a video camera. So we actually use video analytics. We call it sensor fusion. We use both together. But the video analytics helps to confirm what the radar sees, as long as it's got a clear view. And if they both agree, we're like, man, we know exactly what we got here. And if there's a discrepancy, we go with what the radar says, because that'll work in any weather, low light, everything. Doesn't matter if the sun is shining on the horizon and glaring into the camera, doesn't bother the radar. So that's, in a real nutshell, what's going on with it. And it's, again, very, very highly accurate and gives you a good picture of what's going on coming in, entering, exiting the facility. I can go into all kinds of detail more. Feel free and holler at me, and I can get into more of detail anytime you'd like to.
Stephen asks, do you have data on the average time spent at a parking spot? Is it less than 2 hours for a majority of truck parking spots?
Yeah, it actually is surprising. TTI, Texas Transportation Institute, just did a webinar not too long ago, and they were really surprised at how some areas, it doesn't really surprise me. It's surprised them a bit. Although it was interesting to see the real numbers. Some areas you get more long-term overnight stays. Some areas you get shorter stays. Some areas you get even shorter stays, because as I mentioned, there's the overnight parking. There's people who are just staging, for delivery. And there's also times people will just simply stop and take a break because of the weather or whatever, because they don't want to show up early and they don't have a staging location they can go to. So they'll say, hey, I'll just take a break back here outside the big metro area of Atlanta where there's always, traffic mess for multiple hours every day. Let it calm down and I'll go on. So it really varies from one facility to the next, and I don't have a specific number on that, though I can't remember what the TTI study came up with, but Yolanda Prosi there, and who was the other person? But they did a study that got some really interesting data on that on I-35 in Texas.
The last, well, not the last one. Well, relatively last question, is there a way to use a transponder system to keep track of an open parking spot?
A transponder system. So you can, so we were actually just spoke with the Florida Turnpike Authority, or Florida Turnpike Enterprise 2 days ago, and they were looking at trying to find a way to use their transponders for tolls to track parking spaces and all that. And they tried and tried and tried to come up with a way and have not. So I'm glad to say we had a really good conversation with them. So they think that they seem to very much realize they've got a good solution now. So they looked into it and could not find a way of doing it. And but the key thing is if you go to, because that person used the word spot, if you go spot specific for that, you would need to have sensors like above to pick up an easy pass or a pre. I should clarify, easy pass, pre-pass. Those are transponders that allow trucks to bypass way stations when they meet certain criteria. So in other words, if they've got a lot of good inspections, they don't have a history of being overweight, they tend to get bypassed a lot. And that way you don't have to waste time getting pulled in and all that. And people who have problems are, that are violating things, they get pulled in really quickly. They go, oh, we really want to look at you. So those transponders are out there on a very large percentage of trucks. But again, if you want to do spot specific, you'd have to have something above each spot to pick up the transponder that's in the cab of the truck. And you'd additionally have to make sure that that driver is either only pulling in head first or only backing in, and what's the length of their tractor trailer or straight truck, because you'd have to have it located where it's close enough to pick it up. Because if you have a typical over the road long haul truck of a 53-foot trailer and a roughly another 15 foot of truck sticking out in front of it, the cab, that's going to back up into a spot so far. Whereas someone who's got a 48-foot long trailer and maybe a shorter tractor is going to go back in that spot even a little further. And if it's someone with a straight truck like an expediter, which is really popular up here in the Midwest in the automotive industry area, um, they're going to take up even less space in that. So you need to really make sure you're getting it right. Now, if you want to just use it like a screen line count when they enter a facility, that would be a little bit more likely. But again, now you're going with the fact that not everybody has them. Definitely not, especially independent owner operators who are the majority of the trucks out there.
Stephen asks, is there any information of the impact of electrical vehicle truck charging anticipated and associated growth with new parking and EVE?
Oh boy, I was just talking about my TRB committee. We were talking about electric vehicles and trucks and how incredibly not practical that is right now for so many reasons, which is basically the infrastructure is not there in a big way, because that's massive amount of capacity needed. So when it comes to EVs though, while we're talking way down the road for that, for the majority of long haul over the road operations, especially. Local Amazon delivery is another thing, but they're going to charge. I'm the chair of our freight committee for our MPO in Toledo, Ohio. Amazon's building facility that's going to be with Rivian electrical vehicles only. And so the people with the electric utility that covers that area, he's my co-chair of the committee there, the guy who helps these businesses out. They're even sweating out, how do we get this much power in there, just, big air quotes, just for an Amazon facility. We're not talking about, again, over the road semis that need to go hundreds of miles. So the good thing is that I can see with this, it provides a new market opportunity and where there's actually revenue. Because remember, I mentioned a big part of the problem is that these truck stops aren't making money off of truck parking spaces. Well, if they know you're coming in to charge and they can charge you for both the fee of the electricity plus the fact that their infrastructure to build that facility and say, okay, you're going to take up X number of time to charge your vehicle or park overnight. Now that at least there's revenue associated with it. So there's a positive aspect to it that it's going to probably bring about more parking opportunities, but the pace at which it's going to happen based upon my very good knowledge on the other side of this issue of the infrastructure side, holy cow, we're talking slow. And I'll throw in one last thing. Most recently, the Department of Energy, what's the lab called in Oak Ridge Lab in Tennessee? They are very seriously talking about, and some people I've heard say are almost kind of promoting actively, SMRs, small modular reactors, small nuclear reactors, because that's what we're talking about. Having enough power to charge semi trucks quickly. You can't do that from a coal-fired power plant on the Ohio River when you're trying to build the charging facilities that need massive amounts of electricity up on Lake Erie. So that's the level we're talking about of challenges for when we talk about the massive batteries for trucks.
Sarah asks, do you know if pulling in head first or backing in is preferred?
Backing in is definitely preferred because, now let me rephrase. If you have a spot, okay, the best of best of best, like the place I mentioned in Kentucky, for example, if you ever want to see a great rest area, a great facility, Kentucky, I-65, Horse Cave, Kentucky. It's right there, just north of Mammoth Cave National Park. You cannot miss it in a satellite view because it's so huge. There, you pull in to the facility, you pull in head first into your parking space, and then you just pull out of your parking space going forward. That is the most optimal and safest because you're 100% aware of what's going on where in the direction your vehicle is moving at all times. One of the least safe things to do with a semi is back it up because it's articulated and you cannot always see what's going on back there, even when you're on your what's called your sight side, the driver's side, when you're backing in. So that being said, pull through like that is the optimal always everywhere, no doubt, hands down. Now, if you're talking about your typical truck stop facility where you gotta do one or the other, backing in definitely preferred because again, that way you can see what's going on. You can pull up and go, space is clear. I don't see anybody in there. Nobody's moving around. Then you pull up and you begin your maneuver to back in, and you have a relative good amount of safety that it's a safe environment to do it. If you pull in head first, you're good on the front end. You can pull in there knowing, no, you're not going to run over anybody. But when it comes time to pull out, oh boy, I've only ever had to do that probably half a dozen times over that million-mile plus of driving, and it drove me bonkers. And what I would do is I got out and I quick looked around. I had the truck up, I had my logbook ready to go and everything. Hopped out, walked back, looked around, and like, okay, had my CB radio turned on, and I inched that truck out. And the whole time my heart was pounding because I'm like, please, nobody come by, please don't let anybody come by. But that was just a couple times, every once in a while that I had to do that. So definitely pull through is best. Backing in is next. And when it comes to that, backing in at an angle like Petro does If you want to look for a good example, Petro truck stop chain, their parking spaces are angled, which makes it even easier for you to see where you're going backing in.
Are there any other questions? That being said, we would like to thank Mr. Grenerth for presenting to our student chapter and the research center today. I'd like to thank everyone for joining our webinar today. If you're interested in attending another webinar, we have one April 19th, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with WTS and FMRI. Also, if you're interested in watching this lecture again on YouTube, Caleb, do you have a question?
And I'll just quickly say thank you, everybody, for the good questions. Those were good.
So yeah, if you guys want to watch the webinar at a later date, we have everything on YouTube and on our website. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.